Coast Main Line between Doncaster and Grantham after an incident. In Cheshire, the A49 is closed on Tarpley Road at Oakmere after an accident. In Derbyshire, on the A38, there's a lane closed westbound north of Derby. Repairs after a lorry caught fire between Little Island and Palm Court Island. Queues back beyond Belper. In Worcestershire, the A442 is closed at Broad Common after an accident. On the A1M in Hertfordshire, there's a lane closed northbound after an accident between junctions 1 and 2 off the M25, with delays in both directions. Train services are suspended between Avonmouth and Severn Beach because of a points failure. And in Berkshire, the A329 is closed north of Wokingham after an accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. It just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme." The fight for these veterans and their families lives on because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service.
Good morning, 9:30 on Wednesday, the 22nd of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Thanks for joining us. So, the bionic MP, the Conservative MP for South Thanet, Craig McKinley, returns to Parliament for the first time today since his battle with sepsis left him without any hands or feet. We're going to follow his journey all morning.
And the under-pressure former Post Office chief, Paula Vennells, is before the public inquiry for the first time this morning. What did she know?
And the Turbulence tragedy. 73-year-old granddad Geoffrey Kitchen died yesterday on board a Singapore Airlines flight from London. 6 people remain in a critical condition. Do horror stories like this put you off flying at all?
And inflation has fallen to 2.3%, lowest level in almost 3 years, but not as low as the government and all of us wanted.
Anne Robinson, TV presenter for many years, she's worth 50 million quid. Do you know what she's going to do with it? Give it to her children before she dies.
Because she wants to avoid inheritance tax. Some people will say unethical. I say good on her.
Absolutely. It raises interesting issues, though, doesn't it, about the relationship in the family. You could end up in poverty as an elderly person if you fall out with your kids and you've given them all your cash. We're going to be debating that at the top of the show. We've got Sam Fowles and Charlotte Griffiths here. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. It's just after 9:30 and a recap of the headlines this hour. Rishi Sunak has claimed today's fall in the rate of inflation to 2.3% is a major moment for the UK economy. It's down from the March figure of 3.2%, driven by lower gas and electricity bills. The slowdown, though, is not quite as big as experts had predicted, prompting uncertainty about when the Bank of England will cut interest rates. The Prime Minister, though, says everything is heading in the right direction.
And inflation is back to normal. And that is an important moment for our country, for the economy, and shows that our plan is working. And whilst I know people are only just starting to feel the benefits and there is more work to do, I hope this gives people confidence that if we stick to the plan, there are brighter days ahead.
However, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has warned the government can't be taking a victory lap.
This is about more than lines on a graph. It's about family finances. And the truth is, after 14 years of Conservative government, working families and pensioners are still worse off. And the truth is, I'm much more ambitious for the country than Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt seem to be.
Well, as we've heard this morning, Conservative MP Craig McKinley is returning to Parliament today, 8 months after he was rushed to hospital and placed in an induced coma. He had extreme surgery to remove both his hands and feet after contracting sepsis last year. The 57-year-old has been fitted with prosthetics and told our political editor, Chris Hope, that he's looking forward to being known as the Bionic MP.
I'm hoping people might give me the benefit of the doubt and say, that man's been a fighter for himself. He's damn well going to fight for me. I'm going to give him my support.
The Bionic MP?
Bionic MP is what I want to be.
Paula Vennells has arrived at the Horizon inquiry this morning with victims urging the former post office boss to come clean about failings. Wrongful prosecutions of sub-postmasters continued during her time in charge of the company between 2012 and 2015. She's likely to be questioned about whether she lied to Parliament about the faulty IT system. And finally, tributes have been paid to a 73-year-old British man who died during severe turbulence on a flight from Heathrow to Singapore. Jeff Kitchen suffered a suspected heart attack and has been described as a gentleman with integrity. His wife was one of the passengers who was injured after the plane hit an air pocket and suddenly dropped. 71 people are still in hospital in Thailand, where the flight was forced to divert. Despite the trauma, though, 143 passengers did make it on to another plane to complete their journey to Singapore. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's more from Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning, 9:34. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
We've got some breaking news to start the programme. The bodies of 2 women have been found inside a house in Nottingham.
Police say the bodies had lain undiscovered for some time. We're sending our reporters to the scene and we'll have more on this later in the show.
And moving on, the extraordinary story about the Conservative MP Craig McKinley, who returns to Parliament today after his battle with sepsis.
You may have seen the brilliant documentary that GB News did about this last night. Craig had extreme surgery that removed both his hands and feet, replacing them with prosthetics.
So Craig spoke, and his wife spoke to GB News political editor Chris Hope about his extraordinary journey. And just a warning, the following report contains some sensitive images.
But one day, his life changed suddenly. It was one of those days that will be etched on Craig's memory for life. It was the end of September 2023. He was getting ready to go on holiday with his family. He started to feel unwell, and unexpectedly, Craig had contracted sepsis.
So the Grim Reaper let me survive, but he's taken his payment in 4 of my limbs. But that's the way it is. Plenty worse things happening.
That is it. No way back. And yes, he was very matter of fact. He accepted that they black, they not any use anymore. And that's it. So he had a very long operation. And he did come back without those black arms and legs. And by then I was fine. I just knew that is it. That's the new future, new life begins.
When your body just isn't doing something you want it to do and you think you can do it. I mean, when I had skin grafts, and they're very painful. Funny enough, skin grafts have been more painful than anything else, more painful than the amputation. And just trying to transfer off the bed onto a wheelchair, and you're sort of bouncing across, and it is so painful. And you are in tears of frustration that this is just, why is it so bad? why isn't this getting better? But no, I've been pretty much cheerful throughout. I just think I'm probably coming to the end of my tether of being under the care of an institution of the NHS for so long. Big sadness to me is holding little one's hand, going to school. Can't do that anymore. We can sort of hold hands, but I can't feel that she's holding. That's a little specialness that's never coming back. You know, that touch of hands, it's gone. Being an MP at the end of the day, I hope is about what you got up here rather than knocking on every door, much as I'd like to. But yeah, life will have to change. And if it means more time with family, that has got to be a change for the absolute good, and I'm looking forward to that.
What an amazing man. If you missed the programme, it's on GB News' YouTube channel. I would highly recommend you watch the whole thing. And Christopher Hope is with us.
I mean, I've known Craig McKinley for a long time, and I'd heard he'd been so ill, but Chris, extraordinary. His fortitude, he's coming back to work. When you think how many Tory MPs are abandoning Parliament because they think they might lose their seat, and he's got a majority of 10 or 11,000, might well lose.
He's a model of public service, Andrew.
Isn't it?
And you set aside, he's obviously not everyone's cup of tea. He's Marmite. He's on the ERG. He's one of 28 Spartan Tories who fought Theresa May's deal. He chairs the Brexiteer. He's a net zero scrutiny group chairman. He doesn't like net zero much, or he understands it, but doesn't want to imposed government diktats on people. But pull all that to one side, he's lost his arms and legs, and he wants to fight and win his seat again in South Thanet, becoming East Thanet in a general election. It's a real moment, I think, to step back from politics in a week of poison blood. Paula Vennells from the Post Office today, and look at this. People do, as we know, Andrew and Bev, that you go into politics with a higher ideal, and he's demonstrating that, and it's important to remember that.
And the time scale, so he was contracted sepsis in September, and he doesn't know how he got it.
So September the 28th, he's getting ready to go on holiday to Turkey. When you go on holiday, you kind of think, oh, I'm feeling a bit peaky, but I'll survive, I'll get there, and I'll be ill on my sunbed. You don't want to give up and say, I'm not well. We've all been there.
Yeah.
He's got a wife and a little girl.
Holiday. Started vomiting overnight. His wife, Cotty's concerned about it. Olivia's 4 years old. She's getting excited for the daughter for the holiday. They then call the ambulance. They think, well, it's probably just a bit of something. It's like a flu or illness or something. It's not that serious. She's a pharmacist. She's concerned. Tells her brother-in-law, who's a surgeon. They think, get to hospital. He gets to hospital at 10 the next morning. He gets into septic shock. His body turns blue, induced coma, wakes up, and his arms and legs are like they've been dipped into tar.
It's that quick.
It's that
sepsis,
quick.
If you're not...
Yeah, and he's in a coma, a 5% chance of living. You know, Cotty had to say goodbye and was asked, is it worth carrying on? And his limbs, if you watch the film, it's extraordinary. His hands are like leathery, like hard leather.
Yeah.
And he woke up going, what has happened to me? Then the amputation happened in December in St Thomas's, and the videos you saw there were when he's now outpatient in Lambeth. I heard about this, of course, as a political journalist for GB News, and thought, we've got to tell this guy a story. So I went to sit with him in hospital, talked to him, and said, you know, I think you're setting aside all politics. What you're doing now with going back into public life is extraordinary.
Chris, you could relate to him in a way other political journalists couldn't because of your own daughter, Pollyanna.
That's right. My daughter is an amputee, lost a leg at age 2 in a bus crash, and is now a dancer and is an adult, 19 years old, speaks for herself. And she there she is, campaigns on ableism, and she is someone who got her own voice now, so I won't talk for her, but I do know what it's like having to deal with amputee and the drama and the difficulty of that. So I do feel personally stirred into action on this story, but it's not really about me, it's totally about Craig and his wife. And today is a big day.
He's back to Parliament.
We're going to be shortly interviewing him for your programme on GB News.
Very good.
He meets a speaker before PMQs, and then Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer is probably going to say something in PMQs about him. As I say, I think, like Martin Bell back in the day, he now sits almost outside of normal politics. As somebody who is willing to carry on in public life without arms and legs, and it's a lesson to those 65 Tory MPs who are giving up on this party, I think. I mean, putting the politics to one side, he's saying, I'm going to keep serving the public despite my condition, and that's amazing.
It is amazing.
And there are no other wheelchair-bound MPs in Parliament. I've only known one in all the years.
Wheelchair-bound, I mean,
Ambeg.
Rob Halfon has a kind of scooter because of his issues with mobility. I can't.
And it's not a particularly disabled-friendly building.
It's not. There are steps everywhere.
It's a very old building with steps everywhere and not very many lifts.
He's lacking hands. So his legs are made by the NHS. His hands are about £100,000. You'll see them on camera. They were induced to him on Monday. They're metal, and he wants to call himself the bionic MP. The challenge he's got, though, Bev and Andrew, is when you meet somebody, and in politics you meet people all the time, what do? Do you shake hands? Do you fist bump? And when I met him, I wasn't sure what to do, because the touch you have when you meet somebody is so important in the first contact with somebody.
It is.
So do you give them a hug or...?
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, arguably, I think he'd probably be a better MP in a sense, because I do believe in that cliche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
It does. Well, I know that. And he's a changed man. He's going to be a campaigner on sepsis, and he knows about the NHS
Which kills
from inside out.
48,000 people a year,
Well, look at
Chris.
these numbers. 48,000 deaths a year from sepsis, more than lung, bowel and breast cancer combined. Now, we all talk about those cancers. We never talk about sepsis.
Yeah.
You know, the launch of my book the other night, Michael Ashcroft was there, Lord Ashcroft. He had sepsis.
Did he?
In America. Really quick. They thought we were going to lose him, and he battled back. But he's intact. He's got all his limbs.
Yes, it's very rare this happens. What happens is the body shuts down in septic shock, and all the effort by the body is to preserve the organs, so the limbs start dying off.
Gosh. Well, it's an education, Chris, and it's a brilliant film. Well done, honestly. Really well done filming it. And if you didn't watch it last night, I would urge you to go onto the GB News YouTube channel and watch the whole documentary, because he's brilliant.
You know, he's such a nice bloke.
He is really. I mean,
I've always liked him.
No, I love it. I do like him. I mean, he's campaigned with me.
He beat Nigel Farage, of course. Well,
he was one of the 4 people. He set up UKIP before Farage.
Yeah.
6 months later, Farage joined. He's a former leader of UKIP, and he was put up by the Tories to fight Farage and beat him in 2015. He's got us. I mean, again, putting politics to one side, whatever you think about politics, and viewers will have different views of Tories or whatever, forget that. Here's a guy who wants to be an MP without any arms and legs, and that deserves everyone's applause.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well done, Chris. And Chris will be talking
Chris.
to Craig McKinley at Westminster a little later in the programme.
Up next, though, Anne Robinson, TV presenter. She was famously known for hosting The Weakest Link, of course. She's given her £50 million fortune to her family to avoid inheritance tax after she dies. She doesn't want the taxman to have it. Is it a smart move or deeply unethical? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Apparently alcohol abuse is costing England £27 billion a year. I mean, in fairness, that's the price of 2 rounds in London, Nicholas.
Yeah, tell me about it. Not that I'm a big consumer of alcohol. I'm very Mediterranean in my consumption. But revealed, alcohol abuse costs soar to £27 billion a year. So this cost basically encompasses a variety of aspects, from health-related problems, so the cost on the NHS, lack of productivity, people who lose their jobs, social services, and all that. And, of course, it has been on the rise, 37% more compared to last time this was studied in 2003. So now Institute of Alcohol Studies and some other groups are pushing or asking for tougher taxes and tougher regulation. But is that the solution? Like in ancient Rome, they said, in medium stat virtus, like moderation, virtue is in moderation. And again, if they're going to raise the price, people like myself or yourself who are moderate consumers, pardon?
You're going to turn to heroin. Because it'll become... I mean, well, this is what's happened in Scotland.
It becomes unaffordable, so...
Yeah, in Scotland, they had minimum unit alcohol pricing, and so it pushes up the cost of getting off your tree for your average Scottish ne'er-do-well who likes to sit on a bus stop and drink a bottle of cider. So instead, they're turning to street drugs, which are cheaper by comparison.
That is just terrible. I like that the alcohol industry have come back on this. A guy called Matt Lambert, who's the chief executive of the Portman Group, and they represent the alcohol industry. And he says that the IAS, that's the group who've created this, have failed to take into account the significant direct economic contribution of the alcohol industry to the wider economic and social benefits of moderate and responsible alcohol consumption. Well, it's so true, isn't it? We've got a declining birth rate. We need people to get drunk and chat each other up.
Yeah. We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, 9:48. So tributes have been paid to a 73-year-old British man who died yesterday during severe turbulence on a flight from Heathrow to Singapore.
Jeff Kitchen suffered a suspected heart attack and has been described as a gentleman with integrity.
So joining us now in the studio is barrister Sam Fowles and editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. Sam, it was breaking yesterday when we were on air, this news, and it's really shocking because it wasn't a plane crash. Nothing went catastrophically wrong except turbulence, which we're all used to, resulting in terrible injuries and the death of this poor man. Does it change the way you feel about flying?
Well, to be honest, I was already a bit scared of flying. I didn't go on a plane until I was in my late teens, which means I never went through that fearless phase. The first time I was on, I was old enough to appreciate why it was dangerous and why it was scary. So I've always been a bit scared of flying. And the fact that nothing went wrong, the fact that this could happen to anyone, it could happen anywhere, and it has. Well, not just terrifying consequences, but catastrophic consequences for this one poor guy.
Absolutely, and his family. Charlotte, how about you?
Never flying again. I'm never flying again. Oh, well, actually, my husband's going to save lots of money because I'm never flying anywhere tropical again.
Really?
No St. Lucia, no Singapore. I went to Singapore on my honeymoon, actually, on this exact flight. Honestly, I don't think I'd ever do it again now.
Really? Because of this?
Yeah, because of this. I've already got, a bit like you, I'm already a little bit afraid of flying. So I think I could do a short...
You're more likely to die in a car crash on the way to the airport than you are to die in this way.
My husband tells me that a lot, and because I'm always sort of complaining as I get on a plane, going, "Oh, darling, we're going to die." But I just somehow, although that's true, I just don't believe it. You know, when you get in the plane, if you're a bit afraid of flying, all that logic goes out the window, and you just live in fear.
If the people who've suffered most injuries were the people who are not wearing their seatbelts.
Yeah.
And they do encourage you to keep the seatbelt on the whole way through the flight. And actually, I do.
Do you?
I take it off when I go to the whole time, and I have done for years because. If you do fall asleep and there's turbulence, they're going to wake you up, and I just think it's just easier.
Yes, I think, well, this was a really good example of there was no warning, so he bashed the light on as quickly as he could, the pilot, but there wasn't enough time to even do your buckle up, so it is a good lesson in just have it done. What's the harm? It's not like it's very constraining. That's something, if I do a short haul flight, I'll always wear a belt now.
You wear a seatbelt in a car?
Yeah.
A plane goes a lot faster, it's a lot higher. Doesn't make sense not to.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, and I've got to say, I've like many people, been guilty of being a little bit laissez-faire with the safety instructions, and maybe
not listening when they're doing that.
Maybe you're still reading your book or your paper, and I tell you what, unfortunately, I do have to fly for work. I am going to listen attentively to those safety instructions in future.
Yeah. Right, let's move on to this other story about Anne Robinson, Sam, TV presenter, done very, very well. I mean, she's done really well. She's got a £50 million fortune, which is no mean feat. And she's announced that she's going to make sure it's given to her children. You have to give it away, isn't it, 7 years before your death if you're not going to have to pay inheritance tax on it. So she's getting ahead of this. What do you make of it? Would you do this for your children, do you think?
Well, this is my social conscience splitting from my self-interest here. And so, you know, don't hate...
Self-interest every time.
Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Yeah. But this is why it's a flawed system, right? I think inheritance tax is really important. I think people need to be incentivised to earn their own money, not just rely on their parents. However, it clearly doesn't do that because there's a very obvious loophole around it. When I Googled inheritance tax in preparation for this, all I got was just a list of blogs from different financial consultancies on how to avoid inheritance tax. So I think if we're going to have it, and I think we should have it, then we need to cut out the loopholes, and it needs to be a proper inheritance tax, not just something you can get around.
But Charlotte, my parents have worked so hard. I mean, so hard all their life to make sure that they have something to pass on to me and my brother and sister. They've already been taxed on it multiple times. Why should they be taxed on that aspiration and that effort again?
I'm afraid I believe in that too. I can't bear the idea that I'll be taxed after I'm dead, having paid a lifetime's worth of tax. And also, I'm 39, so I'm in that classic generation whose parents bought a house for basically tuppence 40 years ago. And my mum bought her 4-bedroom house in Shepherd's Bush, it's a medium area in West London, for £40,000 when I was born, and she still lives in it. And, fair enough, she wants to live in her house, she doesn't want to move out. But me and my 3 kids are sort of crammed in a flat round the corner. I'm always trying to persuade her to swap with me because I'm like, Mum, you're just sitting in this massive house that you bought for nothing. But she actually doesn't want, and I want her to do the 7-year thing and basically give it to me. Anyway, she said no because she's like, what if we fall out? And then you chuck me out one day?
That's right. That was what we were talking about before the show, of course.
She's given the manual to kids. They may say, sorry, Mum, if you get ill and infirm, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Although, there are...
As a lawyer, can you do a contract?
I'm saying there are things you can do. And so, actually, when I moved in with my then-girlfriend, now my wife, one of the things that I did was draft a document to say, this is your house, there's absolutely no way I can ever have any interest in it to protect you, because otherwise there are legal mechanisms that could have given me an interest. So I sort of did the opposite and took myself out. But there are various ways that you can agree to sort of protect yourself for those 7 years.
Right, OK. And you can take out an insurance policy against your inheritance tax as well, can't you, to some extent, so that you're paying a premium, so when you do die, you've paid for the insurance.
And this is... I was astonished to find out about this industry. But again, here we go. This is inheritance tax helping the economy. It's created an entirely new insurance industry.
It's pernicious and wicked.
Well, I don't think so.
Right, we need to go. Let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/yoursay. Thank you so much, Charlotte and Sam. Up next, Paula Vennells and the Post Office Inquiry. First, your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office on this rather wet Wednesday. Heavy rain's going to spill across many parts of the country, and that does bring the risk of some flooding. It's already a wet start across parts of eastern England, and that rain spilling its way north and westwards across many areas as we go through the day. The rain is really going to be persistent and intense for some of us, and we are likely to see some impacts in association with such wet weather. There will also be some showers around towards the north and also the south of the country, but the sunshine is going to be relatively limited. Temperatures not as high as they have been recently, and under the wet weather it's going to feel pretty unpleasant. Like I said, some showers developing, especially towards the south. Some of these could turn heavy and thundery as we go through the evening. Some frequent lightning, perhaps even some large hail to watch out for here. The greatest cause for concern, though, will be the very wet weather across parts of England and Wales and into southern Scotland too. Here, the persistent rain could lead to totals building up as we go through today into tomorrow in excess of 100 millimetres in some places, especially over the high ground of North Wales. We are likely to see some impacts from it. Towards the northwest of Scotland, there will be some showers as we go through the day, and again these could be a little bit heavy at times too. Through the evening and overnight, the rain does gradually make its way north and westwards, but it takes quite a while to do so, which is why we're going to continue to see those rainfall totals building up and why there is the risk of some impacts, including some flooding. Towards the south, as we go through the night, it should turn largely dry. There may be some clear breaks, but on the whole staying quite cloudy. Temperatures for most not dropping a huge amount. Thursday does look like it will be another wet day for the northern 2/3 of the country. Perhaps the rain not quite as heavy as through today, but nonetheless it is going to be quite a wet picture, and that still brings the risk of some impacts because of the unsettled weather. Drier and perhaps brighter towards the south. Temperatures still not quite as high as they were earlier on in the week, but feeling pleasant enough in any sunshine. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services are suspended between Sunderland and Northallerton because of an incident at Stockton. County Down, the A2 is partly blocked towards Belfast by an accident at Crawfordsburn, causing queues. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed westbound for emergency repairs between junctions 22 and 21 from Rishworth Moor to Milnrow, causing queues. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, there's a lane closed anti-clockwise because of flooding between junctions 17 and 15 from Prestwich to the M61, with queues from junction 19 at Haywood. There are delays of up to an hour and 10 minutes to trains on the East Coast Main Line between Doncaster and Grantham after an incident. In Derbyshire on the A38, there's a lane closed westbound for repairs just north of Derby between Little Eaton Island and Palm Court Island, with queues back beyond Belper. And on the A1M in Hertfordshire, there's a lane closed northbound after an accident between junctions 1 and 2 off the M25, causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Parliament for the first time today since his battle with sepsis left him without any hands or feet. We're going to follow his journey.
And the under pressure former Post Office chief, Paula Vennells, is facing the Post Office inquiry for the first time right now, and about time too. Ray Addison has more.
It's finally here, the day that former sub-postmasters have waited years to see, as Paula Vennells faces a grilling over what she really knew about problems with the Horizon IT system and when she knew it.
And that Turbulence tragedy, the 73-year-old grandad Geoffrey Kitchen, who died on board the Singapore Airlines flight from London. 6 people are still in a critical condition. We're asking, is this going to put you off flying?
And diabetes diagnosis rising. There's been a spike in the under 40s getting diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. It's being blamed, surprise, surprise, on junk food and obesity. Also, do you remember we spoke about a week ago or so to the mother of the boy that died in the Manchester Arena bombing? She's walked from Manchester to Downing Street. She's going to be arriving in about half an hour. We'll take that live.
Okay, 7th anniversary, of course, of that Manchester Arena bombing, which killed, what, 23 people?
Yeah, and injured over 1,000 people, that bombing. I'd forgotten that, the majority of which,
Young
of course,
people.
were young people and children. At gbnews.com/your say is the comments page where you can talk to us and also to each other. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 10. The headlines from the newsroom this morning. Rishi Sunak has claimed today's fall in the rate of inflation to 2.3% is a major moment for the UK economy. It's down from the March figure of 3.2%, driven by lower gas and electricity bills. The slowdown's not quite as big, though, as experts had predicted, prompting uncertainty about when the Bank of England will cut interest rates. But the Prime Minister says everything is still heading in the right direction.
And inflation is back to normal. And that is an important moment for our country, for the economy, and shows that our plan is working. And whilst I know people are only just starting to feel the benefits and there is more work to do, I hope this gives people confidence that if we stick to the plan, there are brighter days ahead.
However, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has warned the government can't afford to take a victory lap.
This is about more than lines on a graph. It's about family finances. And the truth is, after 14 years of Conservative government, working families and pensioners are still worse off. And the truth is, I'm much more ambitious for the country than Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt seem to be.
As we've heard this morning, Conservative MP Craig McKinley is returning to Parliament later, 8 months after he was rushed to hospital and placed in an induced coma. He had extreme surgery to remove both his hands and feet after contracting sepsis last year. The 57-year-old has been fitted with prosthetics and told our political editor Chris Hope he's looking forward to being known as the Bionic MP.
I'm hoping people might give me the benefit of the doubt and say, that man's been a fighter for himself. He's damn well going to fight for me. I'm going to give him my support. The Bionic MP? Bionic MP is what I want to be.
Victims of the Horizon scandal are urging a former post office boss to come clean about what she knew during her time as the former boss. Paula Vennells is giving evidence at the start of her much-anticipated 3 days of questioning at the Horizon inquiry. She was in charge of the organisation from 2012 to 2019, while those wrongful prosecutions of sub-postmasters continued. She's likely to be questioned about whether she deliberately misled MPs about the faulty IT system. Ireland has officially recognised Palestine as an independent state. In coordinated announcements with Norway and Spain, the Irish Premier said a two-state solution is the only credible path to peace in the Middle East. Israel says the move will strengthen Hamas, though, and has recalled its ambassador from Dublin in protest. Simon Harris made the announcement this morning.
Today, Ireland, Norway and Spain are announcing that we recognise the state of Palestine. Each of us will now undertake whatever national steps are necessary to give effect to that decision.
Tributes have been paid to a 73-year-old British man who died during severe turbulence on a flight from Heathrow to Singapore. Jeff Kitchen suffered a suspected heart attack and has been described as a gentleman with integrity. His wife is one of the passengers who was injured after the plane hit an air pocket and suddenly dropped. 71 people are still in hospital, we understand, in Thailand, where the flight was forced to land. The mother of one of the 22 people murdered in the Manchester Arena bombings is expected to arrive at Downing Street today after a 200-mile walk. 15 days ago, Martin Hett's mother, Figan Murray, set off from the spot where he was killed. She's written to the Prime Minister asking him to meet her when she arrives in London on the 7th anniversary of the attack. Police are reportedly being told to cut back on arrests because we're running out of space in prisons. The Times newspaper claims police chiefs are being told to pause some large-scale operations until overcrowding in jails in England and Wales eases. It claims to have seen an internal document from the National Police Chiefs Council which warns the criminal justice system may struggle with large numbers of arrests. To weather news, and an amber warning for heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office today for many parts of England and Wales. Slow-moving, heavy showers are expected until tomorrow morning, potentially triggering flooding and bringing some travel disruption. Some areas could see up to 4 or 5 centimetres of rain. And just a quick update on that breaking news we've been reporting on this morning. We understand 2 bodies have been found in a property in Nottingham, 2 bodies of women. We understand that police were called to an address in Radford after concerns were raised there about the welfare of those 2 women. It's believed they may have been there for some time before being discovered. Police say they don't, though, believe there's an immediate risk to the public. They are keeping, they say, an open mind into what happened. We'll keep across that for you throughout the morning and bring you any more details as we get it. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
What's the time? It is 7 minutes past 10. You're with Britain's News. You're on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Beth Turner.
So the former CEO of the Post Office, Paula Vennells, is speaking at the Horizon inquiry right now. She started by saying how sorry she is for all the for all that the sub-postmasters and their families have suffered.
Yeah, bit late for that, isn't it, when you consider some took their own lives, many bankrupted. Let's bring in our reporter, Ray Edison, who's there for us this morning. Ray, long awaited this, quite why it's taken so long to get her there, and she's going to face, I think, up to 3 days of questioning.
Yeah, it's going to be a gruelling time for Ms Vennells. These 3 days of questioning here. Heard from former sub-postmasters who've waited years to see her face the kind of questions that they've been asking for years and have been really brought to the nation, if not the world's attention, through that drama series that we've all watched so closely. When she arrived, she was virtually scrummed by the media, but she had no comment at that point. She certainly has no option now but to answer questions. However, she was warned at the very start that she had a right not to self-incriminate herself. That was the warning given to her as those questions began just minutes ago here in central London. As you said, she has apologised to sub-postmasters for her involvement, and also said that she felt that she was too trusting when she was asked if she was the unluckiest CEO in the United Kingdom. Those questions will continue today and then for the next 3 days as well, and it's all being carried out under oath, hence that warning against self-incrimination as well. Of course, she was the chief executive of the Post Office from 2012 to 2019. We know that this problem started well before that, back in 1999. However, the major point here is, what did she know and when did she know it? We saw, didn't we, that email exchange that came out and the voice recording which came out within the last 24, 48 hours or so, which seemed to indicate that she had been warned about this problem with the system. However, when she spoke to MPs in 2015, she said she had no idea that there was an issue. I spoke to former sub-postmaster Lee Castleton earlier on, and I asked him what does he want to hear from Paula Vennells at this inquiry. This is what he had to say.
The truth, just what she saw, what she heard. People that fed into her, how she took the decisions she took. She had a chance in 2013 to stop this, really. She could have wiped the slate clean and allowed Second Sight to do a full investigation and allowed us to move forward. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. And then she fought very hard on behalf of the Post Office in the GLO in 2019. And I'd just like to know why. You know, why that had to be, why we've had to lose so many lives waiting for justice.
Well, I also spoke to former sub-postmaster Seema Misra in 2010 when she was 10 months pregnant. She was wrongly convicted of stealing £70,000 from her post office branch in West Byfleet in Surrey and received a 15-month sentence. She said she has mixed feelings about Ms Vennells.
I don't know, like a mixed feeling, you know, angry, excitement, sort of wanted to hear the truth. So yeah, we've been wanted to hear from her such a long time. So let's see what she got to say today. I would like to say to her, please, for God's sake, speak truth.
So within the last few minutes then, Ms Vennells saying that she did probe. She said, I did ask questions and I'm disappointed where information wasn't shared, and it's been a very important time for me to plug some of those gaps. Well, sub-postmasters hoping that those gaps will be fully plugged over the next 3 days.
OK, thank you, Ray. Thank you very much, though, in a very rainy London this morning. We're going to go over now to listen to Paula Vennells giving that testimony herself. Here she is.
The contract with Fujitsu would not have been... the contract with Fujitsu, sorry, let me start again, existed over a very, very long period of time, as the inquiry knows. I was involved with reviewing the strategy and some of the content of the contract with Fujitsu as we prepared to retender the Horizon system in up and during 2015. The original contract with Fujitsu and versions before that would not have crossed my desk as network director or as managing director. What should have happened is the service level agreements within that contract should have been reported on differently than they were. And that also might point to some of your points about bugs, errors and defects. Because if I turn to those, the reporting that the group executive, the chief executive and the board received, and the inquiry heard this from Leslie Sewell as well, was at different levels. So I think we had a level 0 and a level 1 that came to my level and to the board. Issues that cropped up below that were not reported. One of the biggest challenges, as I have been going through all of this documentation, is realising how much went on at an individual postmaster level. So when a bug affected large numbers of post offices, or there was an outage which affected large numbers of post offices, or a network failure, they were raised. But if a single sub-postmaster made a call X number of times to a service centre, it wouldn't have been picked up. And I think from a governance point of view, there is, and the point has been made previously, a very important lesson around the issue of the institution and the individual. How does somebody, as a chief executive of an institution this large and complex, have sight to what happens to an individual if they are affected by a bug? The only thing I can think about is that it ought to be possible to have data which reports the number of times a postmaster may complain about something, the number of disputes that have not been resolved, age disputes, disputes where postmasters have challenged them.
Isn't all this really obvious?
It is, and it wasn't in place, and it should have been.
If it was really obvious, why wasn't it in place?
I think because of the way that the reporting had been planned. Management information across many areas of a business tends to be written in layers of escalation. And the layers of escalation that were selected around IT and Fujitsu were such that it didn't. And I think this probably happens in many, many other large institutions too. It didn't give you, on a board, a line of sight to what happened to an individual. And we are seeing the terrible impact of that today.
So is the overall answer to my question that you don't believe that there was a conspiracy to deny you information and documents? The reason such information and documents didn't reach you was the way that the company was organised and structured?
I think in the majority of cases, yes, that is true.
And who was responsible for organising and structuring the company?
Sorry, if I may just say, the other point is that I have seen documents and I have heard evidence where I think colleagues did know more information than was shared, and in those cases either mistakes were made or they decided it wasn't appropriate to do so. To your first point, in terms of, sorry, could you say that again?
Yes. If it was the organisation and structure of the company that prevented this information and these documents from reaching you, who was responsible for organising and structuring the company after you became CEO?
I was responsible for... As CEO, you're accountable for everything. You have experts who report to you. So the decision on what would have been reported on IT, for instance, would have been decided by the IT director. When I was chief executive, in an attempt to get more on top of some of the issues that were reported, I asked Alistair Cameron, for instance, to put in place an operations board where it began to review some of those things that were raised. But in terms of what you put in a report, the IT reports the Post Office had were not that different from ones I've seen in other big corporate companies. The difference for the Post Office, as a result of what we're discussing here today, is that it somehow did... It was... At the time, it did not see what was happening in an individual post office if that was... it was just at a level that didn't reach us, and that was wrong. And there needs to be different sort of reporting that would have flagged that.
In a note that Alice Perkins wrote before the departure of Susan Crichton to you, she said, quote, "It's the fact that she, that's Susan, sees so much as beyond her control that's the problem. It's her alibi." Do you think the same could be said of you?
No, definitely not. I asked questions, I oversaw the strategy which would have introduced changes where we felt it was appropriate to the organisation. I probed, I worked in a structured way and an informal way. I would walk around the desks in the organisation and talk to people just to find out what was going on. I was sometimes criticised in team development events for being too curious and stepping too much into people's territory. I don't think that's a criticism that could have been levelled at me.
You tell us that you always enjoyed a good relationship with Moya Green, the chief executive of Royal Mail Group, in your witness statement.
Yeah, we had a good working relationship.
You say, no need to turn it up, paragraph 259 on page 114, "I got on very well with Moya."
I got on very well with most of the people I work with, yeah.
I'm focusing on Moya Green at the moment. She overlapped very extensively as chief executive of Royal Mail Group, with your holding the most senior positions in the Post Office. Yes?
Yes.
She became CEO of Royal Mail Group in July 2010. You became MD of Post Office in October 2010.
Yes.
She left in 2018 and you left in early 2019.
Yes.
So a very substantial period of overlap. Can we look, please, at PVEN 50532? This is a new document for the inquiry, having been properly disclosed by you recently. It's an iMessage exchange with Moya Green, and I think you'll be familiar with it.
What was the reference again, Mr. Beer? Sorry.
PVEN 50532.
Thank you.
Can you help us to date it, please?
I think this is January this year.
You'll see that the way you've screenshotted it includes the words "yesterday" at 6:46. That doesn't literally mean yesterday from the day that you disclosed it to us. It was that captures...
I think Moya had been away. She had come back to the UK. I have a sense this is around January time, because I think it was at the time of the ITV drama.
That would make sense, because in the third paragraph it says Nick was a poor witness chairman gone. That's a reference to Mr. Staunton, yes?
I believe so.
And he resigned, I think, or was required to resign on the 27th of January 2024.
Yes.
Let's just read through it. Paula, just back in the UK, what I have learned from the inquiry / parliamentary committee questions is very damaging. Nick, that's Nick Reed, yes?
Yes.
Nick Reed was a poor witness. Chairman, as we've established, that's Mr. Henry Staunton, correct, yes? Has gone. He will be next. When it was clear the system was at fault, the Post Office should have raised a red flag, stopped all proceedings, given people back their money, and then tried to compensate them from the ruin this caused in their lives. Moya. And then if we go down, please, the next page. Keep going. You say in reply, yes, I agree. This is taking too long, Moya. The toll on everyone affected is dreadful. I hope you had a good break and are well. Best wishes, Paula. Moya Green. I don't know what to say. I think you knew. Moya. You reply, no, Moya, that isn't the case. She replies, I want to believe you. I asked you twice. I suggested you get an independent review, reporting to you. I was afraid you were being lied to. You said the system had already been reviewed multiple times. How could you not have known? Over the page. And scroll down. Moya, the mechanism for getting to the bottom of this is the inquiry. I've made it my priority to support it fully. Moya Green. The Post Office did not. They dragged their heels. They did not deliver documents. They did not compensate people. Paula, you appealed the judge's decision. I'm sorry. I can't now support you. I've supported you all these years to my own detriment. I can't support you now after what I have learned at Moya. You'll see in the course of that exchange, Moya Green accuses you of knowing.
Yes.
Did you understand that to be an accusation that you knew about bugs, errors and defects in her horizon?
No, I understood this to be Moya, and there is a further series of exchanges of text where Moya steps back a little bit from the challenges that she's putting here. I understood that Moya had returned to the country earlier this year, that she had been listening to all of the information in the inquiry, and she was trying to square her memory with what she was hearing. That's.
If we go up a page, please. She says in the second text down, I think you knew, and you say that isn't the case. What did you think you were denying?
I think Moya was possibly suggesting there that there was some conspiracy, as you mentioned earlier, and as I said, I didn't believe that was the case. She may have been saying that I knew. No, I think it's the same thing. I was going to say about a cover-up, but the same thing.
At the text at the foot of the page, she asks you the question.
So that's Paula Vennells. Paula Vennells giving evidence at the inquiry. We've got Stephen Pound in the panel with us, and Mike Parry. Stephen Pound, the significant thing I heard her say was staff did know information, didn't share it. Is she saying it's everybody else's fault?
Well, that's what it looks like. But I mean, this is a clear failure of leadership. You know, the fish rots from the head. And I think she was the head. Now, I mean, you don't want to kick a person when they're down, but in all honesty, she kicked a lot of people when they were down.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is that when you have people have died, people that committed suicide, pregnant women have been sent to prison. You know, this is outrageous. It's one of these other horror stories that seems to overshadow British society today. But, I mean, Paula Vennells, on the one hand, she's done the right thing by surrendering her CBE before.
Well, it took a while to get...
I agree, but, I mean, in all honesty, I think she should realise that the potential for a custodial sentence is very, very real now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to what I think is the absolute central point of this, and that is that I was regarded a sub-postmaster or sub-postmistress as a pillar of society, alongside the vicar, alongside the policeman, alongside your doctor. You just couldn't believe that they were in any way corruptible in any form.
And not so many of them.
Well, I was about to say, if one or two rogue cases came in, you'd say we must investigate that. Whoever was at the post office and suddenly started seeing the numbers tumble and tumble, hang on, had some collective madness come over sub-postmasters and mistresses that they suddenly decided all to rob the businesses they worked for? Why didn't somebody with a bit of common sense say this can't be happening? Yeah, that's all you had to say was, look, check out the computers. Now, the problem is, because they took that decision too late, all the bigwigs then decided we should have done this years ago, so I'm afraid we're going to have to find a way of diverting blame. And I see Ken Clarke yesterday, who you've had dealings with over the decades, is also in the frame for having not behaved.
The contaminated blood.
Absolutely.
This is about faith in institutions, isn't it, Stephen? I mean, the NHS, the infected blood, the post office.
I know.
A much revered institution for many years.
Well, also, you know, the police service, the prison service, you know, you name it. I think we've got almost an existential crisis here in British society. I don't want to be alarmist about it, but just nothing seems to be working, and there seems to be every stone you lift up, there seems to be something horrible slithering underneath it. This is pretty terrible. I think we've got to actually draw the line and say, look, we cannot carry on like this. We just can't go on being a third-rate nation, you know, with a first-rate past. It's not good enough. Paula Vennells has got to go, I think, and I think that's where we start. I don't know about Ken Clarke. I mean, you know, I look into the details of that a bit more. But at every other level, you know, you see these absolute horrors taking place. Occasionally a spark, like occasionally a good, like Craig McKinley today, you know, the MP for Thanet.
Extraordinary story.
So you do see examples of courage and bravery and honesty and decency.
Well, you do, but
the
Stephen,
dark clouds overshadow almost everything.
We've got to radically change our view on how we treat public servants, because you've already said that post office, post-masters, mistresses died, committed suicide, went bankrupt, lost their businesses and their families. It so badly affects people's lives that whoever caused that should go to jail. And it's exactly the same with the blood contamination system. It could have been stopped if people had bothered to look what was going on, but they just chose a blind eye, and people's lives have been ruined.
Mike, I regret deeply the fact that a sub-postmaster on my old patch came to see me to say that he was being stripped of his sub-postmaster licence. He was going to have to move out. So I went to see the post office, went to see the chap who was in charge of parliamentary liaison. He said, the reason is because he attacked one of our people with a sword. And I said, that's a bit out of order, isn't it? And it turned out that what had happened was he'd been accused so many, and he just lost his temper. And he happened to be a Sikh, and he happened to have a ceremonial sword there. And God forgive me, and I'm still guilty about this to I took the post office's word because I trusted the post office.
It's all about trust.
No MP will do that again.
But Stephen, as Mike makes a point, there were nearly 1,000 of the postmasters prosecuted. Nearly 1,000.
Exactly.
Why did nobody think?
Just with an ounce of common sense. Just imagine if vicars suddenly started committing terrible crimes across the country, and the church, and the Church of England said, I don't know, you just can't get a decent vicar these days. Or doctors started robbing the practices they're working in. That would be as bad, but somebody would say, this isn't the way that they usually behave. Something must have gone wrong.
The post office was then high-fiving when people went to prison.
And the prosecutions were predicated on a lie, which was that only the postmasters and postresses could access their machines.
But also the fact that they then sent each other congratulatory emails and said, you know, we got a result. I mean, that is sick. That is
Paula Vennells has just said that she was too trusting. She should have been more cynical, more sceptical, should have questioned.
But also the fact that she had about 5 Quango. I mean, she was in CEO of about 5 different organisations.
This woman was also a Church of England vicar. You can hardly believe it.
Just leave that hanging in the air for a minute.
And also, there are senior politicians involved in this particular scandal who've used exactly the same excuse. I was lied to. Thank you.
The Lib Dem.
Exactly. I was lied to. It's not my fault. People are lying to me.
Wouldn't even meet them.
No, exactly.
No, he wouldn't.
Exactly.
He wouldn't meet Mr. Bates, now star of the TV programme. Let's be honest, if it wasn't for the TV programme, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion.
No, we wouldn't, no.
That's right.
Power of the media.
Yeah.
Wait until you find out what happened during the pandemic. You three are going to have your heads blown off, right?
It's coming out.
It better. We're going to be bringing you all the highlights from the Post Office inquiry here on GB News as well this morning. And we've got a list of brilliant stories to do with you two this morning. We will get to that as well in about an hour's time. First, though, your morning's news with Sam Francis.
10:30, I'm Sam Francis. A quick look at the headlines from the newsroom this morning. Rishi Sunak says inflation is back to normal and claimed it's a major moment for the UK's economy. The rate dropped to 2.3% for the year to April, driven by falling energy prices. But most experts had been predicting an even sharper showdown, and that's prompting doubts about imminent interest rate cuts. Labour says there's still much more to do. The bodies of two women have been found at a property in Nottingham. Police say they believe the remains had been there for some time before being discovered. Officers were called because of concerns about the welfare of the people there, and they say they're now keeping an open mind about what happened. Former Post Office boss has told the official Horizon inquiry how sorry she is for what sub-postmasters and their families have suffered. Beginning the first of her 3 days of evidence, Paula Vennells also said she believed she was too trusting during her time in charge between 2012 and 2019. She's also likely to be questioned about whether she deliberately misled MPs about the faulty IT system. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2729 and €1.1732. The price of gold this morning is £1,899 and 49 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,393 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Tomorrow.
Stephen Pound's trying to... is he trying to sell you his book again?
No, I'm trying to buy his book.
He's bought it.
Yeah.
Right, thanks, guys. Still to come this morning, the incredible story of the Conservative MP Craig McKinley and his battle with sepsis. He's returning to the Commons today. He's lost both hands and both feet.
The bionic MP.
He will be warmly welcomed back. We will have that live. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed westbound for emergency bridge repairs between junctions 22 and 21 from Rishworth Moor to Milne Road, causing queues. In Cheshire, the A49 is closed in both directions off the A556 at Blakemere Village after an accident. There are delays towards there. And as you divert in Derbyshire on the A38, there's a lane closed westbound for emergency repairs after a lorry caught fire earlier between Little Eaton Island and the A6 at Palm Court Island, north of Derby. It's taking over half an hour in queues towards there. In Worcestershire, the A442 is closed at Broad Common after an accident. On the A1M in Hertfordshire, there's a lane closed northbound after an accident because of flooding between junctions 1 and 2 off the M25, causing delays, and trains aren't running between Avonmouth and Severn Beach because of a points failure. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
Well, that has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
10:37, you're listening to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. A lot of you getting in touch.
Yeah, we've got this inflation news as well today. We're going to have Liam Halligan here shortly to talk about this. And Adrian, who is a GB News member, has said inflation falls, but will prices, greedy gas companies, supermarkets, are still going to want their profits to stay the same. And Adrian, a similar Adrian, same Adrian, I hope Craig McKinley gets a standing ovation in Parliament today.
I think that's a given, actually.
That's right. Christine has got in touch to say Rachel Reeves responds to the reduction in inflation by pointing out the Conservatives' failures. Yawn. She says in capital letters, and also the Labour Party have had their heads implanted with answers, says David. They appear robotic and clueless. I think it's just playing it very safe.
Yeah, that would... I mean, I thought Rachel Reeves sounded particularly robotic today, actually, responding to those inflation. Because, look, inflation is down from 3.2 to 2.3%. They're nearly at the 2% target they want. It still means prices are going up, but not as fast. And why can't Labour just say, good? It's good news.
It's quite hard to respond to what is a good news story for the Conservatives in any way other than your soundbite, isn't it? Because they're not going to say, oh, congratulations.
Exactly.
I'm not sure how much credit the Tories...
Well, and actually, and people are still struggling with the cost of living crisis, aren't they? That's the truth.
Kevin has got in touch. Morning, Kevin. I can't work as I'm stressed. I can't work because I have mental issues. I can't work as I'm anxious. I've got no arms or legs, but I can work and I will work. Well done to the bionic MP.
Absolutely.
I admire all people like you. So true. And Sylvie, who is also a member, thank you, Sylvie, says Craig McKinley, a Tory MP who may have lost 4 limbs but has more backbone than any of the current crop of ministers. Maybe it's time the Tories look for a leader with a bulldog spirit.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's an example to us all, isn't he?
He's brilliant.
Extraordinary adversity to lose 4 limbs, and he's back at work today, going to be in the Commons. And on that, we're going to... Chris Hope, our political editor, who broke this story on GB News last night about Craig and his extreme surgery. He's in Westminster and joins us now. Chris.
Andrew. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Bev. Yeah, I'm here in Parliament Square in Westminster. Behind me is the Palace of Westminster. Around 11 a.m. this morning, we'll see Craig McKinley, the self-proclaimed bionic MP with prosthetic arms and legs, meeting with the Speaker of the House of Commons. His first time back in Parliament since September. Then he should be meeting possibly Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, and then into the Commons chamber, when I do expect some loud acclaim. You can't clap in the House of Commons, by the way. I don't want to remind viewers of that, but you can utter words of encouragement for him. That should happen around 11:45, and then as PMQs gets underway at midday, we should be hearing words from both the PM and Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. And I think politics here in Westminster is being put to one side in this instance. In a difficult week of poison blood stories, Paul Vennells in front of the Post Office Committee, you've got here a story of an individual, an MP, who wants to keep on being an MP, without any arms and legs. And that is something, I think, which reminds us why people become MPs. They become MPs because they want to give back. It's not always about them. We might think that from the coverage of Parliament half the time. It is about something bigger than that. And Craig McKinley, I think, epitomises that.
Extraordinary, Chris, and you're going to get to talk to him, I think, aren't you? Because you did a remarkable documentary which we watched on GB News last night, Chris, and I think you've actually spent a lot of time with him while he was in hospital. You, of course, can relate to his plight because of your own daughter, Chris.
That's right, Andrea. My daughter is an amputee, lost a leg in a bus crash when she was aged 2 years old, and so I was very aware. As soon as I became aware of what had happened to Craig, I was going to see him in the hospital, just talking about politics. And as soon as you're with him, his disability falls away. The fact he's got no arms and no legs, when I met him, didn't matter at all. The old Craig McKinley inside there shines out. He's a passionate, he's not everyone's cup of tea. He's passionate on Brexit. He doesn't like net zero much. He helped to found UKIP. But, you know, politics is about different ideas. On GB News, we have all sorts of ideas. We don't always agree with them. And that's the point. He believes in serving the public, and he's going to back to fight the election this autumn, probably, without any arms and legs. And that, I think, deserves a lot of credit. So I think we'll be seeing him later, and the reaction will be quite astonishing. I think he'll find himself a changed MP coming back here. He's someone now who sits outside normal politics, I think. He'll be someone who stands for sepsis, for disability, and for battling to help the NHS with its various weaknesses as well as its strengths. A different Craig McKinley will emerge back into public life today.
OK, thank you very much, Chris. Chris Hope there at Parliament Square on the Green.
And it's not especially disabled friendly, the Palace of Westminster.
No.
It's a very, very old building with many, many stairs and not many lifts.
He has prosthetic hands now, he has prosthetic feet or lower leg, and there will be challenges, there's no doubt about it, but what a man of mental fortitude and stoicism. Really brilliant. And I love the fact that we as a channel are doing this story. Because this is what GB News is all about, isn't it? It's about people who are doing their best, working hard, particularly in the face of adversity. We're always trying to represent these stories. You've been very busy on our message board about Paula Vennells. You are not impressed at all. The Post Office inquiry says, James, it seems like the Fujitsu company at the heart of all this seems to be getting off very lightly. Is it because our MPs and ministers all have lucrative shares in them, as usual? Just asking. My kind of question, James. You can ask those all you like. Let's have a look. Gemma talking about Craig McKinley. What an inspiration to us all. She says, Jack, who is also a GB News member, thank you, Jack. Dear Paula, words are cheap. So what does that say about you? A lot of you getting in touch to say that we can't believe we're hearing the same old, it wasn't me, Gov. I didn't know what was happening.
Well, she said that my staff did know information, but they didn't share it. She was the boss. The buck stops at the top. And I think there will be smoking gun emails will come to light during these next 3 days, which will be pretty difficult for her to explain.
Accountability deficit. It is the phrase of our time. It just feels like nobody is ever held responsible for anything. Right, keep your messages coming. gbnews.com/your say. Now, though, the mother of the Manchester Arena bombing victim is arriving at Downing Street any minute now as she finishes a 200-mile walk.
It's the 7th anniversary of her son Martin's death. Figan Murray is campaigning for venues and local authorities in the UK to be required to have training and preventative plans against terror attacks.
Our reporter Sophie Reaper is at Downing Street now. Morning, Sophie. We saw you, of course, with Figan's mother, Figan Murray, on the day that she left Manchester, just from the arena. How has her journey been this week?
Well, it's actually been just over 2 weeks since she set off on her journey, and we spoke to her this morning. She arrived at Marble Arch in central London yesterday. We caught up with her this morning before she set off on this very last leg of the journey to Downing Street. She told me that her hips are very sore and that her blisters are still yet to heal. But I think the overarching message she had was that it's all been so worth it. At the time, I'm sure you'll remember, she said that she wanted to send a message directly directly to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak that how important it was that we get Martin's Law over the line to make sure that our venues, our entertainment venues in the UK are made so much safer in the wake of the Manchester Arena attack. Now, you mentioned she'll be joining us here shortly. They set off from Marble Arch around 9:15 this morning, so we should be expecting them any minute here at Downing Street. Once they're here, they'll then be attending PMQs this afternoon, and then she has sit-downs with both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. She'll be speaking to them about the importance of it, and of course the memory of her son Martin, who was one of those 22 victims of the Arena attack. And she told me this morning she's hoping that Rishi Sunak has really seen the importance of this law and that he'll give her a firm date as of today when Martin's Law will be passed into legislation. I'm hoping she'll be joining us in the next 5 or 10 minutes or so, and she'll be able to tell us more about that as she completes this huge journey, this epic adventure, all to try and make venues safer for us here in the UK.
OK, thank you very much, Sophie. Well, we will await the arrival of Figen Murray this morning. Now, up next, as former boss of the Post Office, Paula Vennells, gives evidence, we're going to be getting reaction from one of the victims of the scandal. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office on this rather wet Wednesday. Heavy rain's going to spill across many parts of the country, and that does bring the risk of some flooding. It's already a wet start across parts of eastern England, and that rain spilling its way north and westwards across many areas as we go through the day. The rain is really going to be persistent and intense for some of us, and we are likely to see some impacts in association with such wet weather. There will also be some showers around towards the north and also the south of the country, but the sunshine is going to be relatively limited. Temperatures not as high as they have been recently, and under the wet weather it's going to feel pretty unpleasant. Like I said, some showers developing, especially towards the south. Some of these could turn heavy and thundery as we go through the evening. Some frequent lightning, perhaps even some large hail to watch out for here. The greatest cause for concern, though, will be the very wet weather across parts of England and Wales and into southern Scotland too. Here, the persistent rain could lead to totals building up as we go through today into tomorrow in excess of 100 millimetres in some places, especially over the high ground of North Wales. We are likely to see some impacts from it. Towards the northwest of Scotland, there will be some showers as we go through the day, and again these could be a little bit heavy at times too. Through the evening and overnight, the rain does gradually make its way north and westwards, but it takes quite a while to do so, which is why we're going to continue to see those rainfall totals building up and why there is the risk of some impacts, including some flooding. Towards the south, as we go through the night, it should turn largely dry. There may be some clear breaks, but on the whole staying quite cloudy. Temperatures for most not dropping a huge amount. Thursday does look like it will be another wet day for the northern 2/3 of the country. Perhaps the rain not quite as heavy as through today, but nonetheless it is going to be quite a wet picture, and that still brings the risk of some impacts because of the unsettled weather. Drier and perhaps brighter towards the south. Temperatures still not quite as high as they were earlier on in the week, but feeling pleasant enough in any sunshine. Bye-bye.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 10:49. You are very vocal on our message board this morning, gbnews.com/you'll say about Paula Vennells giving her testimony at the Post Office inquiry. Peter Wright, who's a member, said, I hope the Post Office official will go to jail like the ones in jail, but not charged. I don't quite know what that means. Debbie said, Comrade Turner backing up her hero Reeves on inflation. In the late 70s, it hit 24%, didn't get back to 3% for nearly 20 years. We haven't had deflation since the 1960s. Rachel Reeves is not my hero. I don't know enough about her for her to be my hero. When she's in office, I'll take a judgment call.
Well,
I don't know.
We're going to get to know her because she's going to be our first woman Chancellor of the Exchequer. That's for sure.
She is. And maybe I will love her or maybe I will criticise her and dislike a lot of what she does. It's too early to know. She's certainly not my hero. Neil says, a woman of the cloth. This is about Paula Vennells. We all know how trustworthy that lot are. I wanted to join, but when they asked me if I'd ever... Oh, no, I can't read that out. No. And Peter said, I wonder if Sir Ed Davey will be punished for this.
Well, he's given evidence to the inquiry already, and he says that he says people lied to him.
Tez, this is brilliant. Tez says...
Because he was Post Office Minister.
Exactly. I would love to see Alan Bates asking Paula Vennells the questions.
Wouldn't they be good?
Wouldn't it be good? And
Alan Bates, of course, who Ed Davey wouldn't see when he was Post Office Minister.
Paul has got in touch to say that can GB News get a legal expert to tell us the probability of Vennells going to prison, please? It is a complicated matter. I would definitely like to talk to a lawyer on that.
We have to know what the charge would be. Is it some form of corporate malfeasance?
Yes, that's probably the...
But if people at the post office knew willfully that people were being prosecuted and they knew that on the basis of flawed evidence, that has to be corporate corruption, and it has to be a matter for the courts to deal with.
Marianne has said ignorance is never an excuse for poor oversight of management, Ms Vennells. In any new system, due diligence tells you if it is fit for purpose or not. People shouldn't have to die, lose their homes, friends and family and fight for 20 years before they are listened to. I could not agree more.
And there is talk that whistleblowers raised the alarm about the IT system years and years and years before it went horribly wrong, one of these postmasters and postmistresses. We shouldn't forget, some took their own lives, some lost their businesses, their marriages, their families, their business. It's a shocking scandal.
Christine, morning, Christine. She said the one thing that came across to me about Craig's story, this is the MP Craig McKinley, that we've been following his story for 4 months here on GB News. And Christine said, is the immense support from his wife and how she dealt with this appalling situation and prepared their daughter. That level of support was immeasurable for his recovery. You're so right, Christine. Cotty is her name.
Yeah.
And well done to her.
Let's go back to the Post Office inquiry, because outside the inquiry is a former sub-postmaster and campaigner, Christopher Head. Christopher, good morning. Vennells is finally in the hot seat. What do you want to hear today from the inquiry? Not sure Christopher can hear us. He can't hear us. We'll come back to him.
He stood there with a T-shirt on that says Post Office Horizon Scandal on his T-shirt. Again, where are Fujitsu? Where are the people who created this technology?
It's the same. See, I take the same view with the blood contaminated blood. The taxpayer is picking up the £10 billion compensation bill. The taxpayer so far has paid billions compensation money, millions of pounds in compensation. It was Fujitsu's wretched IT system that went horribly wrong. Why haven't they paid any money? They say they will after the public inquiry is concluded. That will be 2026, Bev.
Yeah.
Some more of those postmasters and postmistresses will have died.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's wicked.
It is.
They should be making an interim payment right now.
Sort of corporate immunity.
And also, why are Fujitsu still getting government contracts? They should be hanging their head in shame, and we should never trust them again because they got this so horribly wrong.
Yeah. Right, lots of your messages coming in. We're going to read them while we take this very quick break. We're also going to bring you the latest on this story about 2 bodies which have been found in a property in Nottingham. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning. Here's your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office on this rather wet Wednesday. Heavy rain's going to spill across many parts of the country, and that does bring the risk of some flooding. It's already a wet start across parts of eastern England, and that rain spilling its way north and westwards across many areas as we go through the day. The rain is really going to be persistent and intense for some of us, and we are likely to see some impacts in association with such wet weather. There will also be some showers around towards the north and also the south of the country, but the sunshine is going to be relatively limited. Temperatures not as high as they have been recently, and under the wet weather it's going to feel pretty unpleasant. Like I said, some showers developing, especially towards the south. Some of these could turn heavy and thundery as we go through the evening. Some frequent lightning, perhaps even some large hail to watch out for here. The greatest cause for concern, though, will be the very wet weather across parts of England and Wales and into southern Scotland too. Here, the persistent rain could lead to totals building up as we go through today into tomorrow in excess of 100 millimetres in some places, especially over the high ground of North Wales. We are likely to see some impacts from it. Towards the northwest of Scotland, there will be some showers as we go through the day, and again these could be a little bit heavy at times too. Through the evening and overnight, the rain does gradually make its way north and westwards, but it takes quite a while to do so, which is why we're going to continue to see those rainfall totals building up and why there is the risk of some impacts, including some flooding. Towards the south, as we go through the night, it should turn largely dry. There may be some clear breaks, but on the whole staying quite cloudy. Temperatures for most not dropping a huge amount. Thursday does look like it will be another wet day for the northern two-thirds of the country. Perhaps the rain not quite as heavy as through today, but nonetheless it is going to be quite a wet picture, and that still brings the risk of some impacts because of the unsettled weather. Drier and perhaps brighter towards the south. Temperatures still not quite as high as they were earlier on in the week, but feeling pleasant enough in any sunshine. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not a wind up, is it? I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, you shocked me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
.11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
He is the bionic MP. The Conservative MP for South Thanet, Craig McKinley, returns to Parliament for the first time today since his battle with sepsis left him with no hands or feet. We're going to follow his journey all morning.
And the former Post Office Chief Executive, Paula Vennells, is before the Post Office public inquiry for the first time right now. She says she's very sorry.
And a diabetes diagnosis shock number in the cases of people suffering from diabetes type 2 in the under 40s. Guess what? Obesity and junk food.
And inflation has fallen to 2.3%, its lowest level in almost 3 years, but not as low as we were expecting.
gbnews.com/your say is a place to get in touch with us. You can talk to each other and also to us. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 11. The top story this morning, Rishi Sunak is claiming that a fall in the rate of inflation to 2.3% is, he says, a major moment for the UK economy. It's down from the March figure of 3.2%, driven by lower gas and electricity bills. The slowdown, though, is not quite as big as experts had predicted, prompting uncertainty about when the Bank of England will cut its interest rates. But the Prime Minister says everything is heading in the right direction.
And inflation is back to normal. And that is an important moment for our country, for the economy, and shows that our plan is working. And whilst I know people are only just starting to feel the benefits and there is more work to do, I hope this gives people confidence that if we stick to the plan, there are brighter days ahead.
However, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves has warned that the government can't afford to take a victory lap.
This is about more than lines on a graph. It's about family finances. And the truth is, after 14 years of Conservative government, working families and pensioners are still worse off. And the truth is, I'm much more ambitious for the country than Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt seem to be.
Victims of the Horizon IT scandal are urging a former post office boss to come clean about what she knew. Paula Vennells has begun her appearance at the Horizon inquiry in London with an apology for all that sub-postmasters and their families have suffered. She was in charge of the organisation from 2012 to 2019, while wrongful prosecutions of sub-postmasters continued. She's also likely to be questioned about whether she deliberately misled MPs about the faulty IT system. Well, as we've heard this morning, the bodies of 2 women have been found at a property in Nottingham. Police were called to an address in Radford after concerns were raised about their welfare. It's believed that they may have been there for some time before being discovered. Police say they don't, though, believe there's an immediate risk to the public, and they're keeping an open mind into what happened. Conservative MP Craig McKinley returns to Parliament today, 8 months after he was rushed to hospital and placed in an induced coma. He had extreme surgery to remove both his hands and feet after contracting sepsis last year. The 57-year-old has been fitted with prosthetics and told our political editor, Chris Hope, that he's looking forward to being known as the Bionic MP.
I'm hoping people might give me the benefit of the doubt and say, that man's been a fighter for himself. He's damn well going to fight for me. I'm going to give him my support. The Bionic MP? Bionic MP is what I want to be.
Israel has recalled its ambassadors from Ireland after it officially recognised Palestine today as an independent state. In coordinated announcements with Norway and Spain, the Irish Premier said his country was taking the decision for freedom and justice. Israel's foreign ministry, though, have warned on social media the move would fuel extremism and instability. But Simon Harris says it's the only pathway to peace.
Today, Ireland, Norway and Spain are announcing that we recognise the state of Palestine. Each of us will now undertake whatever national steps are necessary to give effect to that decision.
The mother of one of the 22 people murdered in the Manchester Arena bombings is expected to arrive at Downing Street today after a 200-mile-long walk. 15 days ago, Martin Hett's mum, Figan Murray, set off from the spot where he was killed. She's written to the Prime Minister asking him to meet her when she arrives in London on the 7th anniversary of the attack. Tributes have been paid to a 73-year-old British man who died during severe turbulence on a flight from Heathrow to Singapore. Jeff Kitchen suffered a suspected heart attack and has been described as a gentleman with integrity. His wife was one of the passengers who was also injured after the plane hit an air pocket and suddenly dropped. More than 50 people, we understand, are still in hospital in Thailand after the flight was diverted there, with 20 in intensive care. The test firing of rockets at a Scottish spaceport has been hailed as a major success. The UK Space Agency praised the success of the rocket's first stage of testing on the Shetland Islands last week. Debbie Strang from Saxavord Spaceport says the UK could become the leading country in Europe for small satellite launches.
We are the first vertical launch spaceport in Europe already. So we are the first licensed spaceport in Europe. So to a certain extent, you could say we're already leading the way in launch terms in Europe. We will be the first to launch when that happens later this summer.
And finally, children who submitted a joke to the Beano are being included in this week's edition in recognition of their humour. The comic received entries from schools across the country after searching for their funniest jokes. Beano's chief gag makers whittled the wittiest submissions down to their favourite 10, which went forward to a public vote. Northside Primary School in London won the competition, and here's the joke, don't laugh too hard. What's the hottest area in the classroom? The corner, because it's 90 degrees. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Let's return to the breaking news in just a moment about the bodies of the women who've been found in a house in Nottingham. First, though, your messages at home. You've been very busy this morning. And then, do you know how this works? They send a message, they can talk to each other, and then they go on Twitter to say thank you to me when we read out the messages. I love this connection. It's the connected world. Now, what have you all been saying? Jax has said, did she time her tears correctly? This is Paula Vennells, of course.
Oh, don't tell me she's been crying.
No sympathy at all for her. Paul said Vennells and her ilk are a disgrace. I would have a little respect if they were honest. It just feels like lie after perpetual lie. She could face criminal proceedings, we think, in this inquiry if it turns out that there was some sort of corporate malfeasance.
And cover-up.
And cover up, absolutely. OK, let's return to this breaking news. 2 women's bodies have been found inside a house in Nottingham.
Police believe they've been there undiscovered for quite some time. We're going to bring in our reporter now, Will Hollis, who is there in Nottingham at the scene. Will, morning. Tell us more.
Good morning. Yes, well, police say they are keeping an open mind as to what happened here at this incident in Nottingham on Hartley Road in Radford, not too far away from the city. The bodies of 2 women were discovered after a welfare check, after concerns were raised after not seeing the occupants for quite some time. At around 11 o'clock, police arrived here at the street Hartley Road in Radford, and then soon after they discovered the bodies of the 2 women. The conditions, the state of the police cordon here right now at the road is a little bit smaller than maybe it would have been yesterday. There is police tape around the front entrance and the back entrance, and there are 2 smaller police community cars in front and behind the building. Now, police, as I say, are keeping an open mind as to what has happened here after the women were found after being undiscovered for quite some time. Detective Chief Inspector Ruby Burrows from Nottinghamshire Police said that whilst we don't believe there is an immediate risk to the public, we are keeping an open mind as to what happened at this address and will be working hard over the next few days to establish how and when these 2 women lost their lives. In the meantime, my thoughts and those of every other officer involved in this investigation are with those who have died, their family and their friends. Now, the state of the property that is just behind me is overgrown. There is lots of weeds, lots of grass. It doesn't appear that the bins have been moved for quite some time. On the back entrance that I was just describing, the curtains have been taken down. There is still a Merry Christmas sign in the window, so it does seem that while these bodies haven't been discovered for quite some time, it looks like the property hasn't been altered or changed in any way for quite some time also.
OK, thank you very much, Will Hollis there. That's a bit of a grim, that's a very grim story, isn't it?
Christmas cards.
Blimey.
And that's 5 months ago.
Absolutely. Now, inflation has fallen to 2.3%, its lowest level since 2021. Here to break it down, it's our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money.
Inflation is down on figures released this morning by the Office for National Statistics. 2.3% during the year to April, down from 3.2% in March, but that's still above the Bank of England's 2% target. Inflation is now back within the normal range, said Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. And the UK economy, he says, is turning the corner. Let's have a look at the details. Let's have a look at where inflation has come from. Back in October 2022, there it was, 11.1% inflation. That's a 50-year high. It's come all the way down, not in a straight line, but it's come down to 3.2% in March. And then we had the April figure today. And here it is. As I said, consumer prices were up 2.3% during the year to April. The lowest headline inflation rate, the Consumer Price Index headline inflation rate since July 2021, down from 11% in October 22, as I said. The big question now, will interest rates be cut by the Bank of England on the 20th of June when the Monetary Policy Committee next meets? And we'll come to that in a moment. Why is inflation coming down? Well, food price inflation is easing. Back in March this year, food prices were 19.2% higher than in March 2022. In April this year, food prices were just under 3% higher than April last year. So food isn't getting cheaper, but the rate at which food prices are increasing has eased very, very significantly. Let's have a look at motor fuels, petrol and diesel. Petrol prices and diesel prices are up in recent months, but in some cases, they're lower than they were this time last year. So petrol was up 3.3p a litre over the last month, and it is actually up 1.5% on April 2023. Diesel is slightly different. Diesel prices also up over the last month from March to April, 3p per litre, but they're slightly lower, 3.2% lower than in April 2023. So overall, motor fuel prices have not really contributed much to this drop in inflation. That's not true for utility prices, gas and electricity. They are sharply down over the last year, 37.5% down since April 2023. Electricity prices 21% down. That's on wholesale markets, plus the Ofgem energy price cap has lowered, which is putting a lid on households' utility bills and not before time. This is a big reason, low utility bills, why headline inflation has actually fallen. What does all this mean for interest rates? Here's the history of interest rates from 2017, ultra low, rising steadily, then suddenly lockdown came and interest rates were nailed to the floor. Since then, we've had 13 interest rate rises and interest rates have been at 5.25% since August last year. I have to say, I can't see the Bank of England lowering interest rates in June when it next meets. They're going to stay at a 16-year high, in my view. There's no Monetary Policy Committee meeting in July, so the earliest at which interest rates could come down, again, this is my surmise, is in August. Overall, UK inflation's relatively low now compared to many other countries. We're at 2.3, the US is at 3.4, the Eurozone is at 2.4. And the government will certainly crow about that. But there is a blot on the landscape. There are geopolitical dangers. We know that oil prices have been going up. Oil averaged $74 a barrel in May 2023. The current price is $84 a barrel. That's 14% more expensive. That is still feeding into inflation. And who knows, with turmoil in the Middle East and still in Ukraine, geopolitical risks mean that those oil prices could spike. And if they do, inflation will go up once again. But it is true to say inflation is down. It's also true to say it's not as much as expected. The last few years have been difficult, says Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, but our long-term prospects are better than any other major European economy. That's what the IMF is saying for now. But the question for the Tories is, do voters feel better off? Will that help them at the general election, whenever it comes?
Thank you, Liam. Now, the mother of a Manchester Arena bombing victim has arrived at Downing Street. She's finished this 200-mile walk on the 7th anniversary of her son Martin's death. Our reporter Sophie Reaper is there with Figan Murray now at Downing Street. Sophie?
Yes, good morning to you both. Again, here we are. Joining me is Figan Murray. First things first, congratulations, you've done it. Amazing.
Yeah, would you believe it? I can't believe it myself, actually, that we're here now.
How do you feel?
Yeah, it didn't actually sink in that the walk itself finished yesterday for the big part. I didn't allow myself to let it sink in. Last night it did, and today is obviously a really important day. Not only the anniversary, but to meet Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer.
Well, obviously, there's a very historic door behind us right now. How does it feel to be here on behalf of Martin and Martin's Law and all those venues that you're trying to make safer?
Well, it's been 5 years in the making, and I can't believe we finally reached that goal. It feels great. I just now need to have the answers that I'm looking for from the Prime Minister, and I really hope he's going to give me the answers.
Of course, when we started this journey with you a couple of weeks ago, you told me that you wanted to send a clear message to Rishi Sunak. What are you hoping he's going to say to you today? I know you've got to sit down with him following PMQs. What are you hoping he's going to say?
To be quite honest with you, I would like a date, an actual date today from him. He told me in a phone call on what would have been Martin's 35th birthday on 15th of December 2022. He told me he's very committed to the legislation. He said it's an absolute no-brainer, it needs to happen. He's supportive of it, and he'll try and get it done as soon as possible. 18 months on, we haven't had that happen yet. I now need an answer from him.
Of course, today, as you may say, is the 7-year anniversary of the attack itself. What would it mean to you today as a mother to have that answer today from Rishi Sunak?
Yeah. It is important because normally on the anniversary, right from the start, that's the day when I switch social media off and I just have a day of reflection and family. And I'm very private that day. Today is quite the opposite. I'm far from private. But it's an important day, and I don't mind doing it for Martin and for all the people who died that day.
Figan, you're an amazing woman. Thank you so much for your time. I know we'll be catching up with you later after your conversation with Rishi Sunak, so I hope that goes well for you. Thank you. We're really proud of you at GBNews. Thank you. There we are. As I say, we'll be touching base with Figan a little bit later on once she has spoken to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Sophie. I just find those mothers who have been bereaved and lost a child, who turn it into something positive, utterly remarkable.
And let's hope the Prime Minister does see her. I'm sure he will. And it's very important.
Yeah, it is. Right, still to come. Are planes safe anymore? Do you feel safe? That's what we're going to be asking. This was the tragic story that broke in our time yesterday about the 73-year-old grandfather from Thornbury who died during that turbulence on the flight from Heathrow to Singapore. Don't go anywhere. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GBNews.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you call him that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And, so, you know, Gareth, speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh Government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm not
if I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:22 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner and Stephen Pound and Mike Parry here. Stephen Pound went and bought me a croissant because he knew I was hungry. Why did you serve it me on a plate with a knife and fork?
It's a tribute that mediocrity pays to genius. I noticed he didn't buy me one.
They only had one left in the shop.
Yeah, well, that's not much of an excuse.
Broken Britain, nothing worse. Everything's empty
I didn't get one, by the way.
Mike Parry didn't get one either.
Well, I didn't get one, and I paid
Oh, well, thank you, Stephen. I do appreciate it. Now, listen, talking about food, these latest figures, Mike Parry, on diabetes, the number of people under 40 being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes has risen nearly 40% in 6 years.
Yes, that's right.
Shocking.
Yeah, and, you know, it'll bring calls again for state intervention in how we eat and all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Which I'm not for. Now, I'm an expert on this because I got diabetes too, right? And
how long ago?
About 6 years ago.
And did you know it was because there was a little too much of you to love, Mike?
It could have been. I'll tell you what the symptoms were. In the summer, getting up in the middle of the night with raging thirst and literally drinking a litre of Dr Peppers, do you see what I mean, which you got out of the fridge, just to get the sugar levels up and all that. I realised something was wrong, went to the doctor. He said, it's quite simple, you've got to disabuse your body of sugar and you've got to lose a lot of weight.
Right.
Over the next 4 months, I lost 3 stone.
Wow.
I cut out all sugar in my body. I mean, all sugar, right? Because I used to, if I was in my car going up to Goodison Park, I would get through a large bag of wine gums, a large bag of Maltesers, no joke, large bag of licorice, all sorts. I had an incredibly sweet tongue, okay, sweet tooth. Anyway, I did all that, and I went back to see him, and he said, Mr. Parry, you are a medical miracle. You have got rid of diabetes too.
Well done,
Your
you.
reading when you came in here was 117. It is now 47. It's below 50. As far as we're concerned, you're rid of it. Now, that's what I want to see happen now with all these people who are becoming victims. Not another call for state intervention, put tax on food and all that. I want the lesson to be learned that if you take personal responsibility
you can do
for your own body and what you ingest into it, you can do it yourself. And by the way, you'll feel much better about the sacrifices you've made and what you've achieved than following daft laws from the government to eat this and that.
So was it denial that you were heading that way? Did you? Because you obviously that shock to the system is what made you change your behaviour. But did you just not think about it? You think it won't happen to me? What's the logic?
No. I mean, I put weight on because I ate too much of the wrong stuff, OK? But I didn't care. I had no pride in my body and all that. The most amazing thing is, when I gave up sugar entirely, and I did, I mean, you know, I didn't put it in tea or coffee or anything like that, I didn't miss it for a moment.
Amazing.
And therefore, I'm saying to people who've got it now, don't be worried about giving it up and think that you're going to get a shock reaction. You won't miss it.
What if you had a glass of wine, because that's got sugar in?
Well, I cut down on booze in a big way, but actually, funny you should say that, the concentration of sugar in red and white wine is very high. If you drink ales, it's not as bad. So I was still able to have a couple of ales because the sugar was low, but I gave up wine for 6 months, you know. And,
Stephen, this is going to be one of the biggest issues for the next government, the Labour government, perhaps incoming.
It is, because this actually factors into one of the biggest questions facing us in society today, about how much can the state tell the individual what to do. And you remember that the famous Times headline back in the 19th century, we will not be bullied into health. You know, and I think, Mike, not everybody has your iron self-control.
Well,
I think there's a couple of things.
But he didn't have it, though. He needed the shock, didn't he? Yeah, but he needed the shock to the system to then take responsibility for it.
But, you know, on the one hand, we should always be careful about what we put into our bodies. I mean, we all know that. The reality is, diabetes is just an aspect of the obesity crisis. Obesity crisis is costing the NHS billions. And so what's going to happen is, you know and I know already, the government is doing this thing about sending people text messages and saying, we'll give you 150 quid if you lose a couple of stone in weight. You wait and see semi-glutamide or Ozempic. You know, that will be available on the NHS soon. But people won't take it because people don't believe it's going to happen to them. Mike, and I think everybody should actually listen to that.
I think they will. I think they will take the jab because you see, it means they don't have to do the work like Mike's done.
But I agree with you. And to me, that is dealing with it falsely, because all you're doing is, I've got this magic drug now which will solve my problem. You've got to do it yourself. What were you going to say about this?
You're putting it off. You're not curing
of course
you're
you are.
putting it off.
Of course you are,
And that, you know,
But that's the sign, isn't it? The thirst, the very strong thirst of diabetes.
That's an important thing that, like I said, if you do wake up in the middle of the night with a raging thirst, that is a classic symptom.
It is. And the other thing that made me do it, I said to, you know, it was a young doctor, I said, what could happen if I don't get rid of diabetes? He said, you could go blind. And I said, don't be ridiculous. He said, you could. You could lose your right leg. I said, well, what are you on about? He said, well, all the blood vessels, you know, block up and all that. He said, and I've had patients who have gone blind and have lost their leg. That in itself is a great incentive. So all you people out there, and I absolutely mean it, if you've got diabetes, do something about it, because it can be very, very debilitating.
It can also be identified very quickly and very accurately by a very, very simple blood test. So, and it's well worth having that.
Right, can we talk about something completely different here, Mike? This is about the death of the Iranian president in a helicopter earlier in the week. And the reaction of the United Nations to this man's passing.
Unbelievable. Stephen will tell you something about the reaction of our Foreign Secretary in a minute. What's his name? Cameron, thank you. But this was drawn to my attention. At the Security Council, this is in the United Nations, OK? Member states were invited to stand and observe a minute's silence for Raisi. Now, this man, Raisi, hanged between 3,000 and 30,000 young people over 30 years ago when he was coming up in the ranks in Iran, purely because they liked Western values, purely because they reacted to tyranny. But in some cases, women were hanged because they were victims of rape.
That's right.
OK? It is the most disgusting regime on earth. And yet, listen to this. Those taking part in this tribute shamefully included our own Deputy Ambassador to the UN, James Karlukin.
I'm amazed.
At the same time, Iranians were letting off fireworks and handing out sweets meet in their own streets to celebrate the demise of this monster.
Known as the Butcher of Tehran.
The Butcher of Tehran, because he killed 30,000 people.
And as a woman, looking at the situation for women in Iran, which has never been worse, arguably, Stephen, I find that really chilling that all these Western leaders would stand up
I find it terrifying. And don't forget, a young woman was actually beaten to death by the police for not wearing her hijab
That's
properly.
right.
Yeah. I mean, you know, God forbid that we ever give credit to something like that. Look, for the position of our man in Washington or in New York, everybody else stood up. And I think it would have been difficult for the British not to have stood up.
No, I would have not stood up.
Well, I wouldn't have stood up. I would have said, I'm sorry, this is, you know, we are the United Kingdom.
But the point I was going to make was, why didn't somebody have the courage to actually, as people were standing up, to say, no? Why didn't somebody say that?
He could have walked out.
That would have
That's what I would have done. Because the Foreign Secretary had a statement drafted for him by Foreign Office officials and refused to read it out.
Because it's a very powerful, country. Right, Stephen, Mike, thank you so much. Still to come this morning, as Tory MP Craig McKinley returns to Parliament after his battle with sepsis. We're going to be talking to another quadruple amputee sepsis survivor to find out what her life is like. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has branded a transgender football manager as a straight, white, middle-aged bloke. Lucy Clark, who's been appointed manager of Sutton United's women's team, you can see Lucy on your screen now, responded saying, "Another day of hate-fueled transphobia against me." Now, Rowling's comments have resulted in her being accused, of course, of bullying as she continues her rampage on social media. J.K. Rowling once again proving utterly fearless in her pursuit of free speech along the areas of transgenderism. Do you think here she's got a point? Do you think, however, she might be being accused of being transphobic?
This isn't about a football manager. It's about challenging the taboo that says you're not allowed to say the true sex of a person if that person claims a transgender identity. And it's because she's speaking the truth that people are saying it's cruel or it's not allowed or it's transphobic. Because especially women have been... have had this constraint imposed on us that we are not allowed to say when we see a male and when it matters. But sometimes we have to be able to say that. You know, how can we talk about single-sex spaces and how can we protect those spaces if we're not allowed to state the fact?
Lucy apparently is well liked by the team. Should be left to get on with their job. What business is it of J.K. Rowling's?
Yeah, good luck to Lucy. You know, people of both sexes manage football teams. That's nothing new. That's not the story. The reason we're talking about this is because a pride group claimed on X that this is increasing diversity in football. And J.K. Rowling is merely pointing out that football management in particular has always been male-dominated, and the addition of Lucy Smith to the management roster doesn't do anything to change that.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
11:33. Don't forget it's PMQs at midday. And as always, Christopher Hope and Gloria Di Piero want your question for the Prime Minister. gbnews.com/.
There will be a lot of talk about Craig McKinley.
Quite
we'll
right.
Be going into the comments just before Prime Minister's questions. Our first bionic MP.
And we will see that live. We've followed his story, of course. You can still see his story on gbnews.com, on our YouTube channel, actually. Now, you have to go, don't you? You're ditching me early today.
I am.
I'm going to be replaced...
She's being replaced by a younger model.
Tom Harwood will be here with me in just a moment. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Sam.
11:33, I'm Sam Francis. A recap of the headlines this morning. Rishi Sunak says that inflation is back to normal and claimed it's a major moment for the UK's economy. The rate dropped to 2.3% for the year to April, driven by falling energy prices. But most experts had been predicting an even sharper slowdown, and that's prompting doubts about imminent interest rate cuts. Labour says there's still much more to do. Former Post Office boss Paula Vennells has broken down in tears at the Horizon IT inquiry as she apologised for telling MPs the business was successful in every court case against sub-postmasters. You can see here, if you're watching on television, Paula Vennells giving evidence. Earlier, she admitted mistakes were made, but denied there was a conspiracy to cover up the scandal. In charge of the Post Office between 2012 and 2019, she said she's sorry for what she called sub-postmasters and their families suffering. The bodies of 2 women have been found at a property in Nottingham. Police were called to an address in Radford after concerns were raised about their welfare. It's believed they may have been there for some time before being discovered. Police say they don't believe there's an immediate risk to the public and they're keeping an open mind into what happened. And Conservative MP Craig McKinley has returned to Parliament this morning and will attend Prime Minister's questions later, 8 months after he was rushed to hospital and placed in an induced coma. He had extreme surgery to remove both his hands and feet after contracting sepsis last year. The 57-year-old has been fitted with prosthetics and has told our politics editor Chris Hope he's looking forward to being known as the Bionic MP.
It's a bit like one of those New Year moments where you're with friends celebrating a New Year and you think, was it really a year ago? Now, it was 8 months ago I was here, and I think it's going to be a very emotional day. I'd like to thank the Speaker for such a warm and fulsome welcome. It's really good of him, and to receive the family.
That's the latest from the newsroom for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Next, a look at the markets.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2732 and €1.174. The price of gold is £1,898.74 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,393 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
It is 11:36, Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Andrew Pearce has morphed miraculously into Tom Harwood.
Look, I've just had a bit of Botox, that's all. Still Andrew.
Not as much as him. Now, we've been covering this story all morning. Tory MP Craig McKinley is in Parliament now. It's his first return since he began his battle with sepsis that saw both his hands and feet replaced with prosthetics about 8 months ago.
Well, let's hear what he had to say.
It's a bit like one of those New Year moments where you're with friends celebrating a New Year and you think, was it really a year ago? Now, it was 8 months ago I was here, and I think it's going to be a very emotional day. The authorities here have been in contact on a daily basis for the last 10 days, saying anything you need, what can we do to smooth the way. I have no doubt I'll have to find a new myriad of routes through with lifts and things, but I can manage stairs a little bit, and that's getting better on a daily basis. But no, the authorities here have been fantastic at getting me ready to be back here. I know they'll look after me. It's a place that does look after its members, and I'm really thankful to the Speaker for doing all he can for that. But I'm really looking forward to get back in that chamber, back in the saddle, working for South Thanet residents and getting back to work. I've got the same campaigns, a few new ones now, about sepsis and limb loss. Of course, I'll be a champion of from here on in. But yeah, very pleased to be back.
Oh, that was Craig McKinley speaking just a few minutes ago. I'm pleased to say now we're joined by sepsis survivor Corinne Hutton. She's now the founder of Scotland's leading amputee charity, Finding Your Feet. Corinne, thank you so much for joining us here on Britain's Newsroom. This is such a moving story, and I think people have been so affected by watching yesterday's documentary here on GB News I suppose it must be a pretty profound moment to have a champion for amputee causes, sepsis causes now in Parliament.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more champions now out there that are helping the cause, but certainly wouldn't do us any harm. And I find it quite surprising how alike Craig's case is to mine, and the situation, the 4-year-old child, 5% chance of survival. It's almost identical to mine, except mine was a chest infection in the first case.
Sorry to interrupt you, and we just warn you, Corinne, that if Craig arrives at the House of Commons, we will have to interrupt you to talk, to take that. But it's really lovely to talk to you today. One of our viewers, in fact, several of our viewers, have been getting in touch to say, let's just give a moment to Craig's wife, Cotty, and his daughter, and what this journey has been like for them. How has it affected your loved ones?
Well, I'm sure Craig will agree with me that for us, we lay there in a coma, not knowing what was going on. For my family, they were signing the organ donation register. They were trying to work out how to look after a 4-year-old who's just lost his mother. Yeah, there were lots of horrific things that they had to go through. So even then, when he comes out of the coma, that's when the hard work starts. You've got to, can he convert his house? He's obviously managed, he's done very well, but, you know, how's he going to look after himself? How can he dress? How can he wash himself? And, you know, these are all really difficult things that he and his family will have had to cope with. So well done them. It looks like they're doing really well.
It is remarkable how similar your case is, and I'm sure there are many other people across the country who've been through precisely the same thing, that 5% chance of survival, the very darkest moments, but also in some peculiar way, an uplifting story of how people can get through the toughest of circumstances.
Yeah, quadruple amputations are not that common, to be honest. Amputations are, but to lose your legs and your hands, in my case, or your arms, yeah, it's really tough, and you have to physically learn everything again. It'll be obvious things that you can't do without your hands, like zips and buttons and tying knots, that sort of thing is pretty obvious. But I heard Craig saying that, that holding his child hand is something he can't do anymore. And these are things that people wouldn't even have thought of. I couldn't ruffle my son's hair or touch his cheek. The emotional things are really tough as well.
How good are the prosthetics these days, Corinne? I imagine they've come a long way. Craig's hands cost £100,000. He couldn't get those on the NHS. How useful are your prosthetics, and how could they be improved?
Legs are great, to be honest. Once we've got the legs sorted and I can see Craig walking there, that will develop and the muscles will work, and I can fool most people with my prosthetic legs. Hands, technology is great, but the reality is they're cumbersome, they're warm, they're sweaty. You can't get clothes on and off over them. You have to take them on and off. So I didn't do terribly well with mine for long. I just worked out how to do it with my stumps. But I now have these, which are the best I can get, much better than prosthetics. I was Scotland's first double hand transplantee. So transplantee, I always get that one wrong. I'm very grateful that someone donated their hands to me, and they are just incredible.
Thank you for correcting us on that, Corinne, because I'd sort of forgotten that detail of your story. You had a double hand transplant. That's absolutely remarkable. And do they have full sensation, as everybody's hands would have?
Not full. I think my right hand, my dominant hand, is 95% functioning, but probably about 80% sensations. So I do feel, but there's a delay, and you know, there can be a wee bit of confusion about where the feeling is, but still incredible and miles better than what I had before.
I think Bev and both our jaws dropped when we saw your articulation and just the ability. I mean, it does, I suppose, taking a step back, the advances in modern medicine now, what is available to people, are just miraculous. But when it comes to people who might be worried about sepsis, about spotting the signs, about the importance of that first phone call and getting, I suppose, as early intervention as possible, what were the signs that your family spotted that enabled you to survive that 5% survival chance?
Well, we did a wee bit of work on sepsis awareness, and I found out that a lot of the symptoms they suggest should be showing I didn't recognise them, I didn't have them, I didn't at any point think I was dying. Craig's situation was a wee bit different. His wife, obviously very knowledgeable on the subject and spotted a real impending doom. But for me, it wasn't that. I just thought I had an infection and an antibiotic would take it away. So what we've reverted to with the sepsis awareness is just to raise the point and ask the question of any medic that's around. Just ask the question, could this be sepsis? Highlight it, and then it's up to them from there on.
Yeah, OK. Thank you, Corinne. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Corinne Hutton there, who is the founder of Scotland's leading amputee charity, Finding Your Feet. Are we going to go live to Parliament now? I think we are going to take a quick break, actually. Before we do that, Craig McKinley will be heading to Parliament in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Time for a quick break.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Plenty more rain to come for many of us as we go through today and into tomorrow, and across southern areas there could be some thunderstorms kicking off later on. At the moment we have an area of low pressure gradually making its way northwestwards, and it's this that's driving the heavy persistent rain that's affecting much of the country. Widespread rain across much of England into Wales and pushing into parts of Scotland too. Perhaps a little bit drier across parts of Northern Ireland and far southern parts of England, but here, like I said, some thunderstorms are going to develop as we go through the day. Temperatures are going to be around or a touch above average for some of us, but under the very wet weather, it's going to feel markedly fresher, pretty unpleasant for some. Now, as we go through the rest of the day, we are going to see then some heavy thundery downpours developing across southern areas. Watch out for some hail and some frequent lightning here. Heading further north, the heaviest rain likely to be over parts of North Wales and northwest England. Could see in excess of 100 millimetres, which is why we do have an amber warning in force. Some disruption is quite likely. More rain pushing across parts of Scotland. Even here, it's going to be pretty heavy and could cause some disruption. There could be some flooding. There could be some travel disruption. Even some communities could get cut off because of how much rain we're going to see as we go through the rest of today and into tomorrow. Like I said, that whole feature is pushing its way northwestwards though, and so as we go through tonight into Thursday, we are going to see a bit of a north-south split developing, staying wet across many northern parts, drier further south, but because of the generally unsettled weather across many areas, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount. Tomorrow then is going to be a bit of a north-south split. Wet across northern parts, not quite as wet as today perhaps, but nonetheless plenty more rain to come, so we could see some further impacts. Drier further south, and in fact across far south-southeastern parts we should see some sunshine breaking through, and in the sunshine it's going to feel pleasant enough. Temperatures just about getting into the low 20s. Fresher further north. See you later.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:47. Let us go straight to Chris Hope and Gloria Di Piero in Westminster. Good morning, both. We are all eagerly awaiting the arrival of Craig McKinley as well in the House of Commons. We're going to take those pictures live, aren't we?
That's right. Hi, Tom. Hi, Bev. Yeah, Gloria and I are ready for our PMQ's live show starting at midday. But there's a bit of history being made in Parliament today with Craig McKinley, the Tory MP for South Thanet, going back into the chamber. We expect at 11:50. I've just dashed from Parliament where I've been with Craig McKinley his wife, Cotty, and 4-year-old daughter, Olivia, whose birthday is tomorrow. Happy birthday, Olivia. They've been with the Speaker of the House of Commons. There's some clip will play out on GB News shortly when we can get that back and loaded up. He also met with Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, for a private meeting when it is very clear that on Labour and the Tory side, they're welcoming him back. A parliamentarian, somebody who is giving his life to politics, wants to fight another election without any arms and legs. Extraordinary commitment to public service, and that's the point. Gloria.
What's interesting about a day like today is the normal party politics. I mean, Prime Minister's questions is really where you sort of go at each other, test strips out of each other. But when something like this has happened to a member, it doesn't matter what side of the House you are on, colleagues will hold their hands out to Craig McKinley as a fellow parliamentarian.
Yep.
What's interesting also is the candidate, the Labour candidate who is standing against Craig McKinley, has herself put on social media her expression of love to him and his family in what will be an extremely tightly, fought seat, actually.
Yeah. He's a changed MP, Bev and Tom, in a sense that, of course, he helped found UKIP, who's a Brexiteer, a Spartan, who opposed Theresa May's Brexit deal. We're looking at the camera here. When you look back at the wider angle of the camera there, he'll sit at the front left of the chamber as the camera looks onto the Speaker. So that's where I expect him to appear. And there'll be quite an echo, I think, almost a roar, a rumble of encouragement from other MPs as that happens. But just to say about the changes to Craig McKinley, yes, he's the same person. When he emerged from his car, he was delayed in traffic by traffic on the Old Kent Road, and he blamed it on Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, who's a Labour London mayor, of course. So the old Craig McKinley is in there, someone who is suspicious of net zero. He chairs a scrutiny group in Parliament looking at net zero. He's an officer on the ERG, the European Research Group of Tory MPs. As I say, he founded UKIP, he beat Nigel Farage in 2015. All this is true about Craig McKinley, and yet he is now coming back without his arms, without his legs. His legs made by the NHS, his arms privately funded, £100,000, fitted on Monday. He hasn't yet worked out how to do a thumbs up. I tried to ask him to do a thumbs up. He can't work out his hands and thumbs yet, and they work incredibly by feeling the tension in his muscles. Quite extraordinary. And again, he comes back on later today as a public servant, and this is why I think Sir Keir Starmer's welcoming him back. And also, we expect the PM, because you've got someone here who is giving himself back to 5 more years as an MP if he's re-elected. When other MPs in his party are giving up on the Tories, he isn't.
And Chris, what I was really interested in, having watched this incredible documentary that was broadcast last night, which everyone basically can see on catch-up, and I would absolutely recommend it. An absolutely sterling job.
It's on the GB News' website if you want to watch it again, or the YouTube channel.
And the production team, Rebecca and all the editors, a thoroughly moving and incredible watch. How did it come about?
Well, I got wind of of what had happened to him in early December, and there's me meeting Craig McKinley in his hospital in Lambeth in South London. My daughter's an amputee, so I know a bit about the challenges he's facing, and I felt that it was a story that was really positive, that would almost set aside the party politics that he is. I mean, he's a Marmite MP for many on the left, but I think this is more about serving as an MP. And MPs like you, Gloria, when you were an MP, you get into this game because you want to serve, you want to help people. It's not always about a bad news story. It's about a happy story, about a positive story. Keep watching the screen to the left there. You'll see on the wide angle, he should appear bottom left of the screen, and it's worth watching a reaction of MPs as that happens.
And this is science and technology questions that you are watching now.
That's Miriam Cates there.
Every department has a monthly bout where the opposition get to question, and backbenchers indeed, get to question the Secretary of State, and it just happens to be science and technology questions, which is maybe a link to our first bionic MP, and that's what he told you he wanted to be known as.
That's right, he wants to be the bionic MP. He looks bionic. He's got very silver arms. He's got these hands fitted on Monday. They are formed into a hand shape. he really wants to be this person who can make history. We are used to the odd MP in a wheelchair. We know Robert Halfon has a kind of a scooter he zooms about in Parliament, but never before have we had an MP without any arms or legs. It's quite a moment, I think, for a building which has lots of stairs in it, lots of push-button access. He can't enter a PIN number. I think for an MP, also, he's got to find a way of connecting with voters straight away without really... You can do a handshake, but it will feel strange, and it's how you get past that immediate... Look at of being startled by somebody else.
And the parliamentary authorities, one assumes that actually it's just a load of politicians in the House of Commons, but there are hundreds of staff to support the workings of democracy, and they will have already reached out to say, how can we make you, how can we enable you to represent, to speak for your constituents in the way that you were elected to do?
I've been with a clerk who will be looking after Craig McKinley. She is now escorting Craig McKinley to the chamber of the House of Commons. She's from a group called Member Services. They look after, they ensure this place works for MPs. This House of Commons is a servant to the MPs who work for us. That's how it works. It's very important these clerks make sure the building works for the MPs, and they won't have had an MP like Craig McKinley before. We are expecting, eventually, when we get towards midday, words from Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, and of course the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. We're expecting Mr McKinley to meet with the PM after PMQs for a private chat, a welcome back possibly. I think it's a positive news, Gloria, to me, in a week, you know, started by the infected blood scandal. Today, news elsewhere about Paul Vennells, the former head of the Post Office, giving evidence about the Post Office scandal. This is a reminder, I think, of why politics matters, why so many people want to be politicians despite the bad rep they get.
And actually, it shines a light on sepsis, which I don't feel like I understood properly until your documentary, actually, and until learning about Craig McKinley's story. I know Bev and Andrew on their show, they have been talking and widening this out because it's not something... You know, Craig McKinley is not the first and will not be the last to suffer with sepsis. I was talking to one of our editors outside. She said her dad had been in hospital for between 3 and 4 months with sepsis. So it shines a light on something that I don't think is a condition that is widely understood.
48,000 deaths a year, more than lung, bowel and breast cancer from sepsis. And it's not talked about like cancer in the same way. It's not understood, I don't think. A possible temperature, you can feel awful. It can be misdiagnosed or missed. That nearly happened with Craig McKinley. He had a 5% chance of living last September. By December, he was in London having his legs and his arms amputated below the knee and below the elbow. And now today he's back in the House of Commons. It's a moment, I think. Tom and Bev.
No, it's so significant, and I think one of the most moving moments of your documentary was when Craig was sort of looking on the positive side.
Sorry,
if there is, here he is.
Well,
no, sorry, there's Robert Halfon.
That's Robert Halfon. And in comes Craig McKinley now. You see top left of the screen. He's not wearing his jacket. Round of applause for Craig McKinley.
Which we're not supposed to do in Parliament, but this is a special occasion, and rules can go walk.
As you know, we don't know Sir Keir Starmer welcoming Craig McKinley to the House of Commons. Quite extraordinary, a real moment there. I'm very choked up, having been with Craig McKinley for months in his hospital bed.
Should we listen to the welcome?
For the new bionic MP.
There we are, you heard him there.
Now just answer the question about broadband. My older friend has been a fantastic champion for connectivity on the border. There will be contracts covering North Shropshire and also...
And normal business returns, and she returns to answering the question from a backbencher after... I think she nicked her line from me. I said it was opportune, that it was science and technology questions.
Yeah. Tom and Bev.
This is just Right. Well, we're gonna hand over to you now because it's getting ever closer to the start of PMQs. So, Chris and Gloria, take it away.
Oh, we all got a bit choked then by the scenes, including our. We'll have our panel, obviously. James Murray from the Labour Party, who is already in the studio, and he also got a bit choked up by those images in the Commons. And soon, Alan Mack from the Conservatives will be with us.
That's right. Well, it's midday on Wednesday, the 22nd of May. Back to politics as usual. This is PMQs Live on GB News with my friend Claudia Piero and me, Christopher Hope.
That was all a bit
emotional, isn't it?
Going back to the House of Commons, we just witnessed the most incredibly moving scenes as Craig McKinley returned to the House for the first time since last September.
Just one moment, we go to Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, and Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. They go head-to-head in their weekly Prime Minister's Questions. We'll have full coverage of every moment, every spit and cough. We're getting full reaction from the Minister for Industry and Economic Security, Alan Mack, and Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray.
So I'm going to take the opportunity, since we've got 30 minutes, and James, you are the only one of our politicians who's in